of owning a cafe and other heroic deeds by Beware the Tristero, Chapter 51, Match! The feeling of his plethora of stolen powers abruptly subsiding had been Yagi! Infuriating, jarring, and I'm going to pull out your guts and strangle you with them for this! Frightening! It had been decades, no nigh on a century, since he'd experienced such a thing. I'll slaughter you all! And he didn't wish to experience it any longer. However, his left hand tearing at nutty branches, his right slicing through toughened threads, his body moving, shifting, bulking whilst he struggled to stay on his feet, the quirks which allowed him to levitate and fly, stuttering in and out of existence every few seconds. He felt that fear intensifying. But he would not run. No, these peons needed reminding who he was, who they'd been stupid enough to mess with. And so, with every second he felt his powers return, he'd been counting for the first instance after his initial shock. Whomever or whatever was stripping him of his quirks, the amount of time they could keep him inactive was diminishing. Good. He lashed out with a vengeance. With a sweep of his left arm, lava swathed the area, causing the heroes to curse and fall back, their attacks eaten by the molten rock, the branches, threads, and other bindings disintegrating in plumes of steam, smoke, and ash. Then his powers were gone, an explosion to the head, a bullet through his shoulder. A snarl curled from his lips. They returned, his right fist connected with All Might's jaw, sending him flying, the force of his punch puncturing the air and flashing out a tunnel of spiraling vicious lightning to follow, to further scatter the heroes and scorch a few. His private jet sadly didn't survive the impact. Or explode, more's a pity. No! His powers were gone, a bullet through his thigh, his healing longevity and renewal quirks were having to work overtime. Gran Torino's boot cracked his cheek, an explosion to his back nearly toppled him. Who was responsible? What kept sapping his strength, stealing his power, making him sweat? They returned, his left foot plowed into the ground, the tarmac and earth underneath trembling and shaking, splitting wide open, flinging 5 heroes in the air, including that insufferable Sir Night-Eye. The slabs of dirt he'd loosed, landing to cover 2 pros in huge chunks of heavy debris, whilst his left hand released a flurry of bullets. The decrepit, tiny, ridiculous mentor to his current nemesis cried out, his caped back peppered in pellets, as he fell from the air and skidded across the ruined ground like so much trash thrown from a speeding car. With his reserve so low, he knew that his projectiles wouldn't have been sharp or fast enough to kill the old fool, but, like the swatting of a mosquito, he had one less nuisance to worry about. And he could always have the pleasure of crushing that rickety skull under his Italian shoe later, couldn't he? Yes! His powers died away again. No! His lungs were straining, his limbs were tremoring. He needed to end this quickly. Detroit Smash! Sit! Yowling under the downward force of All Might's anger-fueled attack, he felt himself spreading across the ground before it gave way beneath him. His bones were cracking, his jaw gritted, and then, to his renewed sense of joy, his quirks returned. Wheezing, he pushed back against the fist planted between his shoulder blades, and with a vicious, blood-curdling scream released one of his more devastating abilities, his body becoming the epicenter of an explosive force. Double Bomb Blast! It was a risky move. He knew he'd be in and out of consciousness for a minute or two, but if the pain-laced scream ripping out of Nana's pathetic protege was anything to go by, the sound rippling around the other heroes who'd probably been rushing in to finish him, then this was a gambit that would pay off. Oh, he was going to enjoy crushing each and every one of them with his bare, bloody hands. Ducking down full throttle. Shit, why were heroes so bloody self-sacrificing? Flinging herself atop him, the pair grunted as the roof of their hiding place was blown away in a blast of hot, super-pressurized air. Shit! He tried to hold on to her, but with a resounding boom, she was flung up and away just as the blast subsided. Fuck! His ears were ringing, his goggles were cracked. He'd be sure to buy Lamb Cloud, Obero, another pair. And the area was hazy with dust. Goddamn everything, he couldn't see anyone. He'd promised Dabi and Tomura that he wouldn't get directly involved. Hitoshi, the other tots, and his community had no idea what he was doing or why the cafe would be closed this afternoon, and he'd sworn to himself that Friday would be as normal, but The enemy was still out there, and more than likely responsible for that explosion, an explosion he'd not been able to stop because All Might and plowed the man into the floor out of his field of vision. He'd seen Naoki flung away by the fiend, Mitsuki dodging chunks of earth, Tsunaida flailing to the floor, and Gran Torino plummeting from the air. He couldn't just sit here in the dirt. He had to do something. Boys, he thought everyone, I'm not going to die here if I can help it. I'll find my way back to you if I'm able. I hope you can forgive me if I screw this up because I have to try. He furthered whilst pulling himself up and out of the fully exposed drain his goggles discarded. We've come too far to give up now. Pulling himself up and out of the bowl his explosion had curved out of the airstrip, Shigaraki shuddered, wheezed, and spat two of his teeth out with a hefty speckle of blood. Oh, Yagi would pay for this. Then his head rolling around his neck, his hands patting his bespoke suit. Ruined, tearing his tie free from his neck. The silk threads were stained, shredded, and spoiled, and running through his hair, scorched, charred, disheveled. All for one checked his quirks, all present, his healing factor sluggish, and huffed. No one had attacked him. He could hear yells, shouts, and calls for help. The police force were on the scene then. The air was choked with smoke, ash, and dust. He was only running at around 40% of his usual prowess. Most of his energy depleting as bones, sinew, and muscles sewed themselves back together, his new teeth lowering, his bloodied right eye slowly opening with a reduction of swelling and bruising. Perhaps he'd just have to settle for taking one for all, slaying dear Yagi, and getting himself to his nearest safe house to recuperate. It wouldn't make for his greatest moment, but finally getting his hands on the quirk which should have been his from the beginning, and seeing the tarmac run red with that foolish boy's blood would be incredibly satisfying, wouldn't it? And so, with a hum, he floated out of the crater, not too high for fear of that strange numbness eating up his powers again, and used one of his sensory quirks to scout the area. Two particularly unconscious fools to his right, a few more fools to his left, and Yagi fucking Toshinori! Juggling, his shoes, scuffed, marked, torn beyond a serviceable repair. Touching down, he walked towards his foe, the top part of his ridiculous bodysuit long gone, his muscular chest, neck, shoulders, and arms just as exposed and bruised as his lacerated face. Good! Leisurely, his senses not detecting any threats. For what good were the police force's bullets? What harm could befall him now that his wounds were healed? Sure, a direct hit from his quarry, coughing, spluttering, struggling to get to his feet, poor thing, would sufficiently do him in, but with a snap of his fingers, electrified tendrils whipped out from under his legs to slither, hiss, and snake around All Might, binding him tightly, keeping him subservient. On his knees, teeth gritted, nostrils flared, the sound of his agonized scream, music to his ears. Oh my, oh dear, he crooned, the voltage he was releasing, upping with every step, a selection of the ultraviolet strands cording around the fool's neck, slicing. Does it hurt? Should I finally put you out of your misery? He laughed, his smile broadening as he stood before the gasping, writhing symbol of peace, whose bloody fingers were desperately scratching at his neck and desperately trying to free up the crushing hold on his throat. What do you say, Yagi-kun? Should I pop your head off like a champagne cork, or tear your beating heart right out of your chest? He asked conversationally. Oh, what's that? You can't decide? He furthered, his tone laced with honey and mocking confusion. Well, then allow me to choose for you, né? For old time's sake, Get the fuck away from him, you son of a bitch! Snarling, his observational quirk required more energy than what he could provide right now, didn't it? Shigaraki hissed as an explosive force rocketed around his head, far stronger than before, whilst a surge of branches tore past him, cutting through his tendrils. Wood didn't conduct electricity well, did it? Letting free a roar of anger, he'd been so close! He grabbed the masses of boughs and tornado through the wily scamp, surely too young to actually be a pro, he was sure, straight into All Might, sending both of them tumbling out of the way. Who's a bitch now, child? He sneered with another healthy spit before he turned to face whomever had dared to launch a fireball at his head, his hands curling into fists whilst he primed his feet to stomp them into a shallow grave. Shigaraki-san. Oh? Oh? Well, well, well. He laughed, his smile fierce and tone delighted, as he allowed his Cerulean eyes to take in Aizawa Shouta's form, his hand outstretched. What a stupid, foolish, and suicidal thing to do, from where he'd clearly released the blast, which had further singed his hair. Aizawa-kun, he chuckled. You do surprise me. He admitted, the haze of smoke starting to recede in the breeze as the lava he'd loosed continued to cool, its fires it had caused dying out. You surprised me, too, the raven-haired man admitted, his wavy locks of raven hair waving in the wind, those dark eyes narrowed. You can be a good man, you know, he furthered. You don't have to keep walking the path you're on. Ah, so you hope to sway me, do you? He chortled, his legs walking toward the other, his aura crackling intimidatingly. If you'd arrived here with some of your baked goods, you might have had an easier time of it, he admitted with a smirk. It would, upon reflection, be a shame to kill this man, but any mercy he might have known died a long time ago, hadn't it? Therefore he drew more power to himself, his eyes narrowed and grin menacing. The cafe owner, however, remained where he was, his features impassive regardless of his perilous situation, that hand still outstretched but showing no signs of launching another blast. How very interesting. I'm not hoping to do anything, he eventually calmly replied. I'm just advising you, he added, those handsome features unflinching and resolved. A person's past isn't important. It's the future that matters. Grinning predatorially, he had the pale column of the younger man's neck in his grasp. Oh, so fragile, so easy to snap. And as he lifted him off the ground to stare into those eyes, not frightened even now, he could respect that. He loosened his grip just enough for him to breathe, just enough to hear his final words. And it seems that you do have a quirk, although it's not exactly special after all, Aizawa-kun. And here I thought you powerless. Just a sweet young man with a talent for baking, he mused. And worse still, you're a bleeding-hearted little do-gooder too, aren't you? Such a pity. Swallowing thickly, the part of him that wasn't screaming about the lunacy of abandoning his sense of self-preservation beyond, thrilled that the bastard had taken the bait. Shoda flinched, his body struggling in what he hoped looked like a pathetic worried display. He could hear now Masa in his ear. All might was up. He just needed a little more time. He could give in that. He would. Yeah, that's right. On all counts. He rasped, his hands desperately scrabbing at the hand around his neck, the other's mouth tilting into a cruel please smile. Let's see if you're smiling in a minute, you smug prick. I have a quirk. And now you don't. Igniting his bloody gaze, his adrenaline pumping, the eatery owner regulated his breathing and went through the movements he'd put into place across his mind. What? Feeling the older man's super strength vanish, he viciously snapped the other's wrist that he'd grasped with one quick fluid movement. Drew the bastard towards him whilst throwing his leg up with swift, ruthless efficiency, his shin smashing into the fiend's crotch. Oh! Before stepping back, his crimson eyes still locked onto him, his hair swirling ominously in the air as the country's #1 villain curled over, his lips spilling strange curses, hisses, and promises of death. You sneaky, infuriating bastard, I'll... Keeping his eyes open and ignoring the stinging All Might's on approach, he's going to go all out. Just hold him a little more, CD. Shoda kept his face impassive, their gaze locking. Oh, I'm not a pro. I'm just, what did you call me? A sweet young man with a talent for baking, he told him with a mild shrug. Behind the fiend in his periphery, he could see the dust clearing further still in the wake of flashing neon blue eyes, crackles of power, and a familiar smile. What? The ground started to shake and tremble. The pebbles at their feet were skittering and chattering as the plume of haze pop like a dirty bubble of dust. He, on the other hand, definitely is. Then his mind taking a split second to appreciate the look of dawning horror upon the old shithead's face. The eraser accuser fell backwards into a series of backflips to put as much distance between himself and the impending attack as possible. United States of Smash! He almost felt sorry for Shigenaki. No! Almost. At first, when Aizawa Shouta had rushed to her side, his hands helping to clear the muck from her eyes, nose, and mouth, Bakako Mitsuki had felt a range of emotions, which included relief. Thank God he was okay. Anger. How had that master villain knocked her on her ass so hard? Worry. They hadn't won yet. And disbelief. You want to do what? The latter having been carried to where the young tree-quirked man had managed to hide her, an unconscious Best Genus wounded Sernidai, and similarly passed out Rancherino by Shoda, her slender, injured form safe in his arms. She'd also wanted to strangle the magnificent man. We've not got time to debate this. The cafe owner had breathed. Together we can give All Might the opening he needs. He stated, their words similarly broadcast over the earpieces they all wore with the police force listening in. You word snipe. He's in danger, and it looks as though Shigaraki is getting up. He stated, God damn it, Sho! She hissed. Fine! But if you get hurt, so help me God, I'll revive you just to smack you into next week! She growled, her hands crackling with explosive energy. No arguments here. He'd smiled at her, and goddamn fucking everything, there was no arguing with that face, was there? Okay, Snipe's got eyes on all for one, but he's pinned down and out of ammo. He added, and that prick will no doubt head straight for All Might. He said, his brows furrowing. Full throttle, you're going to boost Mitsuki's explosions from a hidden position. Luckily, he's given us plenty to choose from. He stated whilst waving at the airstrip. That since he knows me and won't expect me to be here, I should be able to distract him for long enough. He mused, with my hand outstretched and the blast being 10 times stronger. That should trick him into thinking that is my quirk. He reasoned. Then I can reel him in close enough to knock him down a peg or two. That is way too dangerous! The academy teacher breathed, her head shaking and arms crossed before her ample chest. We can't let you do that, Aizawa-kun. It's madness and... It's a luck. Gasping, her head and those of the others had snapped to Sernidai, his golden eyes violet as he gazed at Shoda, his smile wide, a shocked laugh leaving him even as he pressed a blood-soaked napkin to his temple. I've seen him do it. He breathed in wonder. What he plans to do is magnificent, he added before nodding at Kamui Woods. And he won't be alone, of course. When she moved her eyes to the youngest of their assembly, a guilty expression somehow crossing his wooden-masked face. A look she'd seen on her own boy's countenance one too many times. Mitsuki snickered. However, in true cat-dad fashion, the man, who was more than happy to risk his own life, but heaven forbid that anyone he cared about try, pointed out, You better be careful, Naoki, or there'll be no more macaroots for you. Whilst his little brother bowed his head sheepishly. Okay, Aizawa, neither. Don't need to get so serious. Don't tell me that recklessness runs in the family. She chuckled, her laugh being shared with everyone aside from a wide-eyed, sputtering Full Throttle. You're all nuts! You can it, sister, she promptly snapped. Her gauntlet-covered hands snagging the slenderer female by the collar of her pink and cream costume. Now come on, she grinned, her eyes wild with determination. Let's go fuck that asshole, shut up! Then, having dragged the smaller, lighter woman with her, they'd sped it to an impact crater, dropped in, and listened to the intel flooding through their earpieces. Just as the eatery owner had predicted, Shigaraki was looming towards All Might, his arrogant face smirking as though he'd won, his tailored pants shredded from below the knee as hundreds of electrified eel-like tendrils lashed out to find the #1 pro. Not on their watch, he wouldn't! KW, now! At Naomasa's order, the 17-year-old, just as agile as his Aizawa niece, so cute, had launched himself like a pro with 10 times his experience, and she'd found herself so unbelievably proud to do as Sernidai suggested, his branches moving to shove the villain and ensure that he and All Might could get to safety. When the first bows made contact, FTBM attack. With pleasure! At the feel of the blue-haired woman's touch upon her top biceps, she'd felt her largest attack swell between her palms and shoot free, her aim true. Eat that, you motherfucker, as it collided with the dickbot's head. She would have been happier if she'd knocked it clean off his suited shoulders, but still. All Might's sidekick was never wrong. He'd seen his plan work. However, as she watched Shoda approach All for One, she couldn't help the fear clutching in her chest. She didn't push full throttle away when the younger woman leaned next to her, dainty hands covering her mouth in worry either. "You've got to be okay, Sho," she whispered to him in her mind. "We need you. We love you. You cannot die here. You..." "Oh, holy shit!" she stage whispered in jubilant glee, her crimson eyes dancing with pride and celebration. Did he just cut shot? The greatest evil our country's ever known." The green-skinned woman next to her gasped, her tone laced with mirth. "Yes, he fucking did!" She laughed, their arms wrapping around each other as they hugged and squealed like fangirls at a concert. "He is so fucking badass, oh my god!" She praised before her gaze clocking onto a menacing, yet somehow ridiculously protective force. She then looked at Full Throttle, who'd seen the presence too. Balking and watching as Shoda backflipped towards them, she and the teacher reached out for him, snagged him, and brought him into their embrace so they could hunker down. "United States of Smash!" That had to do it. There was no way that Yagi could have missed it. He's down. Ragdoll has confirmed it. That son of a bitch is out cold. Then her arms giving the cafe owner who'd changed her life helped to heal her son, saved the fracturing friendship between them and the Midoriyas whilst providing a safe place for them all to grow, live, and laugh in together. A firm squeeze as the latest plume of dirt started to settle down all around them. Miski pressed a sisterly kiss to a sample. "I don't know who you are or where you came from, Sho-chan," she gushed as they all breathed a sigh of relief. "But I couldn't be prouder to have you as my friend."